It's the time for Bible study. I invite Achan to lead us through the Bible study.
Thank you, Lenny. Shall we bow our heads for a word of prayer? Gracious Heavenly Father, as we come before your word, help us to be humble before you and help us to understand the truths that you are conveying to us. In all of these studies and learnings, help us to glorify you in our lives and help us to bring others into a relationship with you. Be with us and watch over our hearts and our minds. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So thanks, Lenny, for the quick introduction. So we're going to be doing a series on different characters of the Bible, but not just any characters. Obviously, this is a women's fellowship, and so we're going to do women of the Bible. And the best place to start would be Eve. The passage we read just now is Genesis chapter 2, and that tells us the rationale behind why Eve was made. But before we can talk about that, we just need to still mention Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. So I'll just read those two verses. Genesis 1, 26 and 27. Then God said, let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Your translations might be a little different on the pronoun usage and if the word humankind was used there, or if the name Adam was used there, or if just the general term man was used there. In English, when we say man, it can refer to the gender, or it can refer to all human beings, right? So when we talk in general terms, that word can be applied to everybody. Same thing in Hebrew. In Hebrew, the word Adam is a name, but it is also talking about man as in the gender, and it's also talking about all of humans. Now, how do we know if we're talking about men in particular or about all humans? Well, we only know when we look at the context. Same thing in our regular speech. We only know based on the context. And based on the context here, we understand that God created humanity, humankind in his image. There are several other places in the Bible that we can go to that can affirm this concept that it's not just men that are created in the image of God, but it's men and women. There is a passage in 1 Corinthians that says that man is created in the image of God. And then later on, it doesn't affirm that women are created in the image of God. And some people think that, oh, that means that women are not created in the image of God and only men are. But that's a wrong way of reading it. We don't have time to get into that, but I just want you to be aware of it in case anyone brings it up later on down the line. You can just very clearly ask them to say, where does it say that woman is not created in the image of God? And there's no verse that says that. Men and women are both together constituting the image of God. In that sense, they have a certain level of equality, don't they? Because together they share the image of God. So that needs to be kept in mind. And now when we get into Genesis chapter 2, there is a term that's used there that has been quite problematic over the years. The first time that God says it is not good is here, because Adam is alone. And when this creature is alone, it's not good. God is the type who is always been in community because he is a triune God. And so he knows that it is best for humans to be in community, to be in fellowship. So he decides to create a suitable companion, or some translations, it may say a helper as a partner. And there are different ways of translating this. So let's take each of these words. Let's take the helper part, and we'll take the partner word. Helper. what does the word helper mean to you? When you need someone to clean the house, who do you call? You don't call the landlord, you call a helper. Yeah, you call someone less. When you want to do things around the house, oftentimes they'll say that person is the helper. And we normally think of this word as something below the other one who is asking for the help. But that's not the way this word is in Hebrew, or even in English, if you pay very close attention to how we use this word in English. In the Bible, there's another person who is considered as a helper. And he's one that you may expect, but he's also, in one sense, if we use the wrong definition of helper, he's the one you would least expect. God. God is a helper. God is a helper to Israel. So you look at Psalm 121, right? I lift my eyes to the hills from where my help comes from. My help comes from the Lord who created the heavens and the earth. So when God says, it's not good for Adam to be alone, let's create a helper for him, it is not in any way saying, let's create someone who can do all the work and who can be the servant for him. It's saying, let's create someone for Adam to do what Adam cannot do alone. A helper doesn't always mean someone who is stronger than the other person, though God is stronger than Israel. A helper is someone who is able to do what the other one cannot do alone. And so in this sense, you see the profound complementary nature that God had in mind when he created women, when he created Eve. He created Eve so that together, Adam and Eve can do things. Alone, Adam cannot do certain things. And maybe another day we can talk about, in a men's Bible study, what are those things that man cannot do alone. But here, for now, we're just focusing on Eve. So we understand that, and that's important for us to understand because this empowers our concept of womanhood. So many cultures have misunderstood this word and have believed that women are somehow created as a inferior gender to men and that they are supposed to serve the man. But that's not what the Bible is teaching here. As God is the helper to Israel, woman also needs to be the helper for man. Okay, the next part though is this word partner. Now in Hebrew, that word is actually a very interesting word. It doesn't show up very often. And in fact, it means opposite. So if you were to translate it literally, it would be God saying, let us create a helper opposite to Adam. But why is that important? Well, it's very important in today's concept, in today's context, because there's all sorts of issues with equality. But the word equality is sometimes mistaken for identical. Man and women are not identical, but they are complementary to one another. They are equal to one another, but they're equal in that they're opposite one another. And this is, perhaps why we have that phrase, opposites attract. When we talk about a good, healthy marriage, a spouse fills all that is lacking in their companion. And in the same way, when God created Eve, God was intending to fill all that was lacking in Adam. So be able to complement and go alongside Adam in this journey of life. So this is the place of women within the family life and within culture. Again, let me just re-emphasize this. It is not the same as identical. Right? There are differences between men and women. There are obvious biological differences. There are not so obvious psychological differences that are have been studied, time and time again. Yes, there is a lot of overlap between the way a man acts and between the way a woman acts. And you can get a man who sometimes has more qualities of a woman, and you can sometimes get a woman who acts more like a man, but they're still different. They're still different beings, different in this gender at least. Okay. Um, Maybe if there's a question, we can talk about that later, but I just want to set that groundwork for everyone, that biblical groundwork that's being affirmed there. Okay, now let's go to another section regarding Eve, and that's a passage that we didn't read, but we're all very familiar with, and that's the whole taking of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and eating it. So Eve, and in our Edifical Mission study, we're going to go into this in more detail because we have to talk about the themes. So we're not going to do that here. We're going to just look at Eve. What did Eve do? She took the fruit, she ate it, and then she gave it to her husband. And normally, women are now blamed always for being the ones who lead men astray. The funny thing is, if you read the passage carefully, it gives us the clear indication that Adam was there the whole time this conversation with Eve and the serpent was happening. And he was just silently there, not saying anything, because suddenly he gave it to her husband who was there. That's how it's written in the Bible. So let's think about this, though, from a different angle. Yes, it is true that the events happened so that Eve took first and gave to Adam. But carefully notice that Adam has a tendency to listen to Eve. Right? And this happens time and time again. Abraham listened to the voice of Sarah. Now, in many of the biblical stories, when the man listens to the voice of the woman, they go astray. But there are times when a man will listen to the voice of a woman and will go on the right path. So think about David, when David was angry at Nabal and Abigail came and told David, don't do this, I'll take care of it. And he listened to her voice. So what's the point? The point is for every woman to realize the influence that they have over the people around them. And this is a profound influence. You have the ability to change the direction of the heart of the husband or the children or the people around. It seems as though women have some sort of a gift in this regard. And this is why it's unfortunate that women don't have more role in leadership, because they would make for great leaders. When Adam listens to Eve, think how differently the story would have gone now if Eve and if women were reflecting the voice of God. If wives, if we in this group could orient our lives closer and closer to Christ, so that when we speak, the husband or the brother or whoever hears a voice, and that voice is the same as the one from the Bible or the one from God, how much of a pull will you have in your family lives? What things can be changed? And this isn't just wishful thinking. Even the New Testament writers know this. So if you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 14, 1 Corinthians 7, 14, for an unbelieving husband is made holy through his wife. Now, that verse goes on to say vice versa, that a husband can bring their wife around. But just notice for a second, in a male-dominated culture, like the biblical writers were in, for them to affirm that a woman's voice can change a husband takes us back to Genesis chapter 3. And it tells us about the power that women have in culture and in the family life. So don't be Don't be fooled by size or by position in the family or by whatever other metrics we use to evaluate men versus women. You have a God-given influential gift that needs to be then used for the right reasons. You go on some of these social media websites and you see the way that women use their influence, how debased it is, how cheap it can be when women use their God-given influence to continue to lead people in the wrong direction, right? They know that they're highly influential. So be careful about how we use our influence. There's another passage later on that we will get to in Peter, First Peter, but that is, I think we will be able to understand it better in light of what we're going to talk about next. So after the fall, God gives his punishments, and he gives his curse to who? There's only two curses, in fact. Adam and Eve are not cursed, by the way. They're punished, but not cursed. The snake is cursed, and the ground is cursed because of Adam. In the midst of the curse for the snake, Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers, and he will strike your head, and you will strike his heel. Again, in the Head of the Commission meeting, we're going to go into more detail on that. But just briefly, I'll tell you, this is a foreshadowing of Jesus here. God is setting the stage and saying, listen, there's going to come someone after Eve who will be the one who will destroy the serpent. He will get hurt and injured in the process, because when a snake bites you, typically in those days, you die. But we know how the story goes. So Eve understood this, likely, that it meant that someone that she was going to give birth to is going to be the one that's going to overcome this sin nature. And so she has a child. And now let's turn to Genesis chapter 4. And we're going to listen to the change that happens in the tone of Eve's voice over the course of time. And whatever change this is, it needs to happen in our lives too. So Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. Now the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have produced a man with the help of the Lord. Now, if you're reading in English, you'll notice that above the word, or next to the word produced, there's a small footnote there. Go down to the bottom of your page and see what that footnote says. That footnote will tell you that the word produced very much resembles the name Cain. And so it's a play on words. Eve gives the name, or the child is given the name Cain. We don't know who names him, but the child is given the name Cain. And it seems to be a play on the words when Eve says, I have produced a man. I have produced a man. Not a baby, but a man. And then this is a challenge, and I don't want to get into the details of this, but there is some difficulty in translating the rest of that verse. In some Bibles, it will say, with the help of man. Very literally, the Hebrew says, I have produced a man, the Lord. Now, Bible translators have their reasons for saying with the help of the Lord, and that's fine. Let's go with that for now. Who gets more credit here? Who is being emphasized here in this sentence? Eve, because Eve is saying, I have produced. The word produced is the play on the word Cain. Who gets the credit, or who gets more of the credit? Eve does. Yes, according to the translation, we can give some of the credit to God. But there is an indication here that Eve is thinking a little too highly of herself. She just used her own voice, and her family went astray. She knows she has influence. And now she was told that the offspring, her offspring, would be the one to crush the serpent. And now she's saying in the very beginning of this chapter, I have produced that man with the help of the Lord. And so we know how that story goes. We know that Cain is not the one. And he ends up becoming the worst character in the beginning of the Bible, right? In terms of violence. And so he goes astray. Now, look what happens when we get to the end of the chapter. When we get to the end of the chapter, there's a change that will happen here. In verse 25, Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and named him Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another child instead of Abel, because Cain killed him. So where is the I statement there? Nowhere to be found. And again, if you, in your English Bibles, if you see the word appointed, there's a footnote there. Look at the bottom of your page and see what that footnote tells you. Appointed is a play on the name Seth. So the naming of Seth is tied to God giving. So how does a godly woman regain her power and authority within the creation? Well, by being humble enough to lean on God and recognize God as the source of everything that we have. It is through the line of Seth that the chosen one comes, not through the firstborn, Cain, right? And obviously not through Abel, though there are reflections of Abel-like characteristics in Christ. That's another study. So what does this tell us? Well, in First Peter chapter 3, verse 3, there's a few verses there that go like this. Wives, in the same way, accept the authority of your husbands, so that even if some of them do not obey the word, they may be won over without a word by the wife's conduct, when they see the purity and the reverence of your lives. Do not adorn yourselves outwardly by braiding your hair or by wearing gold ornaments or fine clothing. Rather, let your adornment be the inner self, with the lasting beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in God's sight. Now, we're not going to get into the nuances of that. This is not a verse against wearing gold. This is not a verse against wearing things that are nice to wear, right? This is about focusing on an orientation in life so that we give God the glory, God the honor, and God the credit. When we in our family lives, when we as a daughter, as a sister, as a mother or grandmother, when we play the role that we play, yes, God has given you a lot of authority and influence, but use your authority, use your influence in the most humble way possible. And when you do it in that way, like Eve does by the end of chapter 4, then God can use us. Then we can really be impactful towards the community around us. So this is just a glimpse of the different things that we can learn from Eve's life. There are more things, but we're going to limit it to just these things. And let's pause for a moment. And are there any questions that you have on this? Okay. So
sorry, just one question.
yes,
So
yes.
where does it specifically say that Adam was there when serpent was tempting Eve?
Yes. I'll show you. Yeah, so in Genesis chapter 3, verse 6, so when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took the fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate.
Sure.
So he was there the whole time. At least that's what the implication is because the husband was with her.
Thank you.
Acha, it might be a silly question, but why was the women, Eve's creation different from how Adam was created? Adam was created from the dust of the ground. God breathed, life into the nostrils, but Eve was created from Adam's rib. So it was a different kind of creation for human form. Why was women created different?
Yeah. So just to quickly put a positive spin on it, you were created from better material. You weren't created from dust like we were. No, that's so that it within the narrative, and there are different ways of understanding this, right? And we can't cover every single way, but one interesting way that I have heard it interpreted, and you have to be a little more fluent in the Hebrew to pick up on those nuances. So in the beginning, God created human, and then the diversity of gender seems to happen at this point when God takes from the side of Adam. And it's not literally the word rib in Hebrew. And so we've translated it as rib because, I mean, translation is not an easy thing. And if there's not a clear, exact correlation of a word in our language, we try the best that we can. But it kind of means that God took the side. And so it gives almost the implication that humanity was created and then the complementary nature of humanity was created.
Money.
So it's not that, I mean, if that's the way to think of it, then it's almost as if the genders at this point were created. Right? That's a little more of a Hebrew, deeper kind of way of thinking about it. And that's not a traditional way that traditional way in the sense that's not how Apache and Amachi taught us. Right? We were taught that it was a male character, and then from the male character comes the female character. And I'm not denying that. We can read it that way. So there are many different ways of interpreting it. But when I think of it in this other context, it helps me to know that the genders are being created at this point, so that it's not that Eve is being created somehow second to male.
Okay, thank you, Acha. Yeah, go ahead, Ninja.
If Adam was with Eve when Eve was tempted, then why does it seem like Eve was punished more by God?
Yeah. Very good question. So like if we had a men's Bible study, this is where I like criticize the men for being quiet when they should have spoken up. Right. So this is a strange thing. That's well, one, we can say Eve did the action first, right? So that would indicate some sort of higher degree of severity on her behalf, right? I don't think that lets man off the hook either. And then the other thing to think about is, and please forgive me, I don't know if the punishments are equal or if they're unbalanced. Now, I know that many will say that definitely it is unbalanced because childbirth is far worse than tilling the ground. Right? So I'm not going to argue that, but I'm just pointing out that maybe we could see that they are different punishments for both. One is not necessarily more severe than the other. So like, Danita, do you think that one is more severe than the other? So why do you think that?
Kind of because it's the pain that's associated with it. Kind of learning about how women have to go through so much for childbirth, and then like kind of the lifelong repercussions of like, even if certain women don't want children, like they still have to kind of deal with all of these, all things like menstruation and cramps and all these things. And so it seems like this punishment is really uneven, and especially now, like there's not a lot of men who like till the ground, So it just feels like it is an uneven punishment.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, that we don't till the ground like we used to. We don't sweat like they did back then. And so, yeah, in that regard, perhaps it is lopsided.
So
Did you want to?
yeah, so like in the legal justice system, I used to work with a prison in Los Angeles, and there is a punishment given for, let's say, there's a 7-Eleven robbery. The person who commits the action of going in, pointing the gun, and robbing the store gets the highest punishment. Typically, when they do that kind of a crime, there's a lookout, the person who's waiting in the car to drive them off. They also catch punishment, but maybe not to that severity as the one who actually did the crime. So I don't know, Ajahn, would it be right to say that he was guilty, but maybe in this context that because she was the first one to take it, that she would have caught a little bit more?
Perhaps. I mean, that's definitely one way of thinking about it. I mean, the other thing is, like, when we look at the males, the Adam's punishment. So Adam's punishment is slightly different in nature than the woman's punishment. The woman's punishment is borne on herself more, whereas the man's punishment is partly borne on himself, in that he's going to have to work hard for the rest of his life. But then, because of him, everything is cursed, right? And that kind of then by association means that because of him, even the woman is suffering an extra bit more. And so there is definitely some fault of Adam here that creates far bigger ripples. And I think a woman got caught in that ripple more than the man did, or at least, I mean, in a theological sense, in a biological sense. In a theological sense, no, we're all caught in the same ripples of sin, right? We're all suffering under injustice. But in a practical sense, yeah, I think it seems like you guys got it worse. Sorry.
Achan, I read. So one time I read this article where there was a big argument about, why the punishment of women is more than men, and why Eve got punished more than Adam. So the reason that they were giving is her decision at that point, and her thoughts and her decision. If she did not decide to go that way, it could not have taken place. And Adam's decision of not saying anything. So I don't know whether this is right or wrong. I just, I read it, so it just came up to my mind.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm hesitant to go in that direction because a lot of these will be spoken. I don't know who wrote that article. I would guess that it's a man. A lot of times people are trying to get off the hook. Adam and Eve both sinned. They both did what God told them not to do. If anything, Eve should have, been less off the hook, or more off the hook, because she hadn't been told directly. Adam was told directly about the commandment, right? Having said that, so the way that I like to think of it is, both of them did something wrong. There are different degrees, right? One was before the other in terms of time in the story, but both did wrong, and both expected and received the consequences of that wrong. Now then, the nature as to whose consequences were worse, I mean, that's what this conversation I think is more about, right? And to that, like, me being a male, I can't say that yours is any less than what men have, right? It would be ridiculous for me to say something like that. I know that you have it way worse than how we have it. But having said that, I don't think that's the intention of the biblical authors to make it sound as if Eve was worse than Adam. There are other parts later on in the Bible when it's always referred to as the sin of Adam. It's not referred to as the sin of Eve, as much as it's always considered as Adam's fault. And so it's understood that Adam is a culprit here too. Both are equal in that regard, that they both broke the commandment of God. Yeah.
Thank you.
Acha, but the word is looking differently. The word is saying that Eve sinned. Because of Eve's sin, the world is, humanity is suffering.
Yeah, Auntie, that's not the world. That's certain men who are, have different kinds of issues about letting women lead and things like that. Adam was there, right? That's why how many times have we read this Bible and we didn't notice that phrase, the husband was there with her. And so we are so quick to let the men off the hook, and don't do that. All of humanity has fallen short of the glory of God.
He didn't stop it.
Yeah, but in today's day and age, it looks like women have to put up with the curse that women were given, and also till the soil. I mean, work hard.
Oh, today
Yeah,
they
in
have to do
today's
both.
day and age, it's like both. Not like it changed much for men.
That's why we need to change it. Right? So the way the world is now just only goes to show us how far away from the Bible we've gone. Right? The Bible has been trying to teach us and show us the right path, even to the point where we've exaggerated the punishment and made it so that certain parts of the community experience it less than other parts of the community, which is not right. Right? And this isn't to be patriarchal and to say that, oh, so the men need to be the breadwinners. That's, again, not what this passage is about. This passage is not about men should be the earners and women should be the bearers.
Where's my?
This is more just in the context of that culture, and from now on, the hope of creation will come through the women, right? That is Jesus. Jesus was going to be born of a woman. But every time we look towards that hope, women will have to also encounter the pain. And for men, every time they till that soil, the next day they have to go out and till it again or pull the weeds again, because their mistake has long-lasting repercussions that go on and on and on. And we are stuck in this forever cycle of having to struggle and strive for life, because that's what tilling the ground is all about. Tilling the ground is food. And without food, you can't live. And we're going on struggling for the rest of our lives. So you can think of it not, don't think of it simply in terms of going to the hospital and giving birth versus going and farming. These are metaphorical ideas too. So that with every glimpse of hope, there is a punch of pain. And with every new day, there is work that has to be done in order to survive because of our disobedience.
Do you think that there was no external factors or pressure during that time other than the serpent being there? Do you think that they were next to each other but still didn't communicate or talk among each other to make that decision together? Just we know that Eve is an influencer, but he just listened and he ate it rather than together being next to each other together, communicating and making that decision together that should we eat it or not eat it.
Yeah. I mean, Adam's a big boy. He can speak up when he needs to. His silence was his permission. His silence was his approval. And the Bible says that he was busted in verse 17 because he listened to the voice of his wife. So he chose to go with what she said. So Adam wasn't led astray. Adam chose to disobey God. And Eve also chose to not recall the words of God properly. So,
So Acha, I think the time that we have to, we have the Sunday school teachers training coming up. So any additional questions that you have, we can either take it up during the next Bible study, or we can send it to Achan and we can discuss it. Maybe even in the parish mission, we will kind of touch on Adam and Eve, I believe, in the next parish mission Bible study. So we can be there also. So thank you, Acha, for leading us through this wonderful story. Honestly, yes, speaking, there are a lot of small details in what you shared with us today that we hadn't really seen, like the fact that Adam was there. It's true, we've read this portion a lot of times, but we haven't really seen that, maybe because we have not been taught about that. We're not willing to look at it. So thank you for sharing, unknown facets about Eve to us today, and how we can learn from Eve, how our actions as women can be used to influence people around us, both for good or for bad. So thank you, Acha, for leading us the Bible study today.